Democrats say the GOP is trying to protect Santos because of their narrow majority. David?
Very interesting discussion on that one. Chad, thank you very much. Well, for more on this, let's bring in Congressman Greg Steube from House Ways and Means Committee and Club for Growth President and former Indiana Congressman David McIntosh. Great to see you both. Thank you for being here. Congressman Steube, first to you, work requirements. It's really a sticking point in these negotiations. It's so important. And of course, it's something that President Biden used to be in favor of, and it was very successful. We'll talk to David about its success. But first, I want you to listen to a soundbite of Mr. McCarthy, the Speaker, talking about it earlier today. Roll tape.
But he also said on work requirements, he'd accept not anything of any consequence. Where does that
Anything that has consequence. This is a senator who voted for work requirements. If he doesn't want to have something that has consequences, he wants to borrow more money from China to pay an able-bodied person who has no dependents, not even to look for a job, not even go to school for 20 hours.
So it's not chump change we're talking about. It'd be a savings of $100 billion, but more than that, it would get Americans back to work, those who've been pulled out since the pandemic.
Yeah, and we already passed a bill in the House, and like you said, Biden himself supported work requirements. Bill Clinton did some reform that supported work requirements because we don't want people to be living on the government. We want people to be successful and get a job and support their families, and they can do that by getting work. And in a state like I represent in Florida, there's plenty of opportunity for people to get work, so put those work requirements in place. And I can tell you this, you're not going to have the support amongst conservatives. If you take out work requirements and the cuts to spending that we want to see, you're not going to get something like that supported by the conservatives in the Republican conference. We already passed a bill. The Senate should be doing their job and send a bill back.
And David, we know it works, workfare. It's not just because Joe Biden said it did, but we had an experiment with it. We tried it 4 years after it was put in place. In 2001, the NIH came out with a study evaluating how it worked. And it wasn't just the savings of money, less spend on welfare. It was also the effect it had on the people who came back to work and the overall economy as a result. The study says 4 years later, welfare rolls have been cut by nearly 1/2. We knew that was going to happen, but most former adult recipients are working and earning more than ever. That means, by the way, they're paying taxes. Child and adult poverty rates have dropped, in some cases dramatically, and the incidence of teen pregnancy is also on the decline. There are all sorts of positive aspects to doing this. Why aren't we doing it now?
That's exactly right. It makes total sense to put the work requirement in, leave the culture of victimhood, and encourage people to work and the dignity of work. It's enormously popular. You know, 70–80% of Americans support work requirements in the welfare system. And as you pointed out, the NIH study, when we passed it back when I was in Congress, we had to do it 3 times before Clinton finally signed the bill. And maybe, you know, it's going to have to take pressure from McCarthy to get Joe Biden to agree to that. By the way, I think McCarthy's doing an excellent job of negotiating, of getting the bill through Congress. And the president, if he just signed McCarthy's bill, it's estimated to be about a 4% increase in the cap value of the stock market, let alone jobs created for people and people getting off of welfare and on to work.
Well, of course, he's not going to do that, just sign McCarthy's bill, but he has come back to the table, and he's saying some good things. It looks like he's taking that default heavyweight off of the weight of the negotiating table. Here's what he said, the president, earlier today about default.
There was an overwhelming consensus, I think, in today's meeting, the congressional leaders, that defaulting on the debt is simply not an option. It's disappointing that our discussions in the congressional Republicans have not been willing to discuss raising revenues, but the policy differences between the parties should not stop Congress from avoiding default.
Congressman, I'm sorry, that actually took place yesterday after the meeting. But it's great that he took default off the table. We saw a rise in the stock market. At the bottom of the right hand of the screen, the Dow was up over 400 points as a result, largely of that. But what's this business about raising revenues? Is he going to try to shoehorn a tax increase in order to get this through?
Of course, tax and spend Democrats. I mean, that's what they did when they had 4 years. They would try to increase taxes and increase spending on the American people. When I first got elected to Congress only 5 years ago, the deficit was only $21 trillion. Now it's $31 trillion because of the spending of 2 years of complete Democratic control. So to try to leverage tax increases on the American people to raise the debt ceiling when conservatives think that we should be cutting spending is definitely not the direction to go.
And David, with a slowing economy, some people are still saying we may end up with a recession before this year is out. Is this any time to be talking about raising taxes?
No, it's exactly the wrong time to think about raising taxes. That could send the economy definitely into a recession or even a deep, deep recession when you've got high interest rates at the Federal Reserve setting and higher taxes and high costs of petroleum that most of the economy runs on. No, a typical, unfortunately, of the radical left side of the Biden administration, that what they want to do, as the congressman said, is tax and spend. The real solution for debt is to cut the spending, and Republican Congress has put on the table a very good way of starting to do that.
Congressman, are there any Republicans, probably not in the House, but maybe in the Senate, that might consider going along with some kind of tax increase, perhaps something that doesn't look like it'll affect the middle class?
Well, there were 43 Republican senators that said they would not vote for a clean debt ceiling increase without spending reduction. So Schumer can't get to those 60 votes because of those 43. So look, we have passed a bill in the House. It's a great a compromise that allows for the debt ceiling to be increased with spending reductions. You're not going to get support from conservatives without cutting spending and putting in the work requirements. It's time for the Senate to do their job and either take up our bill or send us some type of alternative that they can pass.
David, what about all the stuff we found out about? I wanted to use another word, but I can't on television. The stuff that we found out about the so-called Anti-Inflation Act, which turned out to be inflationary, that focuses on green energy. About $800 billion. What do we do about that? How can Republicans in the House bring that to the negotiating table?
Yeah. And by the way, 75% of Americans support cutting spending rather than raising taxes. And what the Republican bill does on that green energy, the so-called Green New Deal light bill, is first, it strips away the subsidies that go with it that are wasted on projects that wouldn't survive in the marketplace. But it also passes something called the RAINS Act, so that when EPA goes in and regulates industry in the name of the Green Deal, Congress will have to be accountable for that and vote on it. And so Republicans and really moderate Democrats can team up to stop the radical agenda that would come with the Green New Deal.
And Congressman, finally, this supersizing of the IRS. We just have this new story about what the IRS may or may not be doing with regard to the Hunter Biden investigation. I mean, it's had a checkered history at best in getting involved in politics, and this would make it even bigger involvement in politics than we've seen before. Is that supersizing of the IRS in there for good, or is there a possibility Republicans can take it out?
Well, we already passed a bill that would defund the 87,000 IRS agents. Of course, another bill that conservative Republicans and the Republican majority has passed and sent to the Senate, and the Senate hasn't done anything about. But this whistleblower issue in the IRS is troubling because it compounds on the history of the IRS targeting conservatives. And we specifically asked him, the chairman asked the secretary of the IRS specifically under oath if he was going to do any type of repercussions for these whistleblowers, and he said no. So that's very troubling that as soon as he made that statement to Congress, now there's been repercussions to that whistleblower.
And we're going to talk more about that coming next. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being here. Congressman, David, good to see you both. Well, an IRS whistleblower, as you know by now, investigating Hunter Biden for tax violations, has told lawmakers that his entire team was removed from the high-profile probe, leading many to wonder whether the Biden White House is influencing the investigation. Fox News' Jillian Turner in D.C. with the very latest. Jillian.
Hi, David. Well, the IRS, now investigating Hunter Biden for tax violations, has informed lawmakers his entire team was removed from the probe abruptly. This according to a letter from his lawyers obtained by Fox News. Take a look. They write, quote, "This move is clearly retaliatory and may also constitute obstruction of a congressional inquiry." Last night, an attorney for the same whistleblower told Fox News his client was informed he was being pulled from the Hunter Biden investigation at the request of the Justice Department and now fears political attacks.
He had a lot of sleepless nights about coming forward with this. At the end of the day, he decided that he could not live with himself if he stayed quiet and said nothing. So he's coming forward, but he knows that he's going to be attacked.
In testimony last month, IRS Commissioner Daniel Werfel insisted, quote, "I can say without hesitation there will be no retaliation for anyone making an allegation or a call to a whistleblower hotline." Earlier this month, President Biden, when asked, once again pushed back against accusations against his son.
Your son, while there's no ties to you, could be charged by your Department of Justice. How will that impact your presidency?
First of all, my son's done nothing wrong. I trust him. I have faith in him.
Fox News has learned from sources that in some circumstances, whistleblowers are sometimes removed from investigations they're involved in order to preserve objectivity, and that such moves can be fully lawful. Whether that is the case here, though, remains to be seen. David?
Jillian, thank you very much. Back with us is Congressman Greg Steube. Congressman, we were just talking about this. We decided to bring him back because there's so much to this story. In certain circumstances, as Jillian said, if a case gets a lot of publicity as this one has, there are attempts to kind of defuse the situation by removing people that might be too close, even if they are whistleblowers. Is that possible here, or do you see something more dangerous afoot?
Well, there's certainly nothing that's coincidental about all of this. And this group and this investigator and these people that were working on this, from my understanding, have been working on it from some time. And on Monday, we got a letter, Chairman Smith got a letter from the attorney of the whistleblower saying that this had occurred. And this is weeks after the IRS head had said that he wasn't going to remove anybody and no retaliation for whistleblowers. And now you have this. So either he lied to the committee, or somebody at the DOJ or higher than that has instructed him to remove this individual. Both of these are troubling, and the Republican majority in the Ways and Means Committee is going to get to the bottom of it.
Now, do we know for a fact that it was the entire team, not just this one whistleblower, that's off the case?
That's what we have been told, is it is a team of individuals. We don't know how many, but that it was a team surrounding this one whistleblower.
Well, how can you find out? I mean, so far the FBI has ignored your subpoena to get the information about that informant who said that there was a bribe to Vice President Biden, alleged that there was a bribe. So since they're stonewalling you on the subpoena, might they also stonewall you on this?
Well, not with the whistleblower. So we have to follow the law as it relates to dealing with the whistleblower, but because he's reached out to Congress, we'll be able to get his testimony, be able to get his statements, be able to get his information and take it from there. There's a lot of steps that we can take, one, to get other witnesses, and two, to bring his testimony to light.
Now, you mentioned Jason Smith, the Ways and Means chairman, who got sworn testimony from the head of the IRS about all this. Let me just play a little soundbite of that and get your reaction. Roll tape.
I specifically asked the question to the commissioner if there would be any retaliatory actions on any whistleblower that comes forward. He said absolutely not. We're going to get down to the bottom of it. The Ways and Means Committee is going to follow the facts, and we're going to make sure every whistleblower is protected under the law. If, in fact, the letter that we received from the counsel of the whistleblower, if, in fact, the IRS removed them from the investigative committee that they have been for a long time.
Congressman, your reaction to that, and again, I ask, if they're now stonewalling you on a document, might they not stonewall you on everything else you're looking for?
Well, first of all, we can use the subpoena power of the committee to start bringing these individuals in and asking them tough questions. But because we have this whistleblower, we should be able to get information directly from his lawyer and following those procedures and policies in place to bring the information before the American people.
All right, Congressman, thank you very much. And now the man in the middle of all this is Oversight Chairman James Comer, who's been involved